Good morning, everybody. We'll make a start. I think there were a few more people down on my list, but they either have found a more interesting seminar or interesting workshop to go to, I won't take offence, or they might join us later. It's a fabulous day today. I'm so pleased to get the opportunity to actually meet people like yourselves who are doing such fantastic things out in our communities and with our churches. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you also for coming to this session today where we're going to be looking at how we can use our church buildings to connect more widely with our communities. I have been working for the Church of England in areas linked to community engagement for over 20 years, quite a long time now, but the last 2 years I've been working for the Diocese of Salisbury on a project with a group of churches throughout the diocese looking at exactly this. In parishes, how can we connect with our communities? And there are two ideas behind this. Of course, the first one is mission, because we are called to be with our communities, and what does that mean for us? And the church building represents that opportunity to connect. The second one is the reality of our caring for these church buildings and what that entails. And a report back in just before the pandemic in 2019 said that we need our communities engaged in our buildings for what they can bring to the buildings themselves, their support. So it's both missional, but it's also about creating a future for our buildings where they are going to be the Christian home and presence, but with the support of the wider community. So we're going to be thinking about that today. And I often think about a phrase that I once heard. I think I heard it on the radio, and it's been attributed to either the Jewish faith or Jim Henson, the founder of the Muppets. So you can choose which source you think it might be. But it's simply this: that children are a joy and a task, or they're a joy and a responsibility. And I think we can probably all agree that there's a lot of wisdom in that. That's probably very true. But I thought, gosh, how apt that is for our church buildings, that they are places of deep joy and meaning, but they're also a task and a responsibility. And so often we're overwhelmed by the sense of task and responsibility, so sometimes it's going to feel a little bit harder to find the joy in them. But today is all about joy. So we're going to be thinking about the joy and the potential of our church buildings. So we're actually going to start where we are strong, and that actually is with you, because we're going to think first about the great things that you are already doing to connect your church building and the community. And what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to think about that, and I'd like to think about absolutely anything that you currently do that brings the community and connects them with the building. It can be really small. It could be as simple as having your church open every day. I think sometimes we forget that in itself is such a service to the wider community. They may not necessarily be aware, but the fact that church is open, they perhaps don't appreciate the effort that goes into that. So it could be really small things, or it may be much bigger things. And can you also think of the different areas you have in the church? So you have, for example, the churchyard, the outside space around the church. That's a place of connection. Physically, it's the first point of connection if people are coming to the church. Then you've got the inside of the church, what you may do or offer that welcomes people, that helps people in the space. And the third area, it would be activities or events that you might run. So I'd like you to have a think about that, but I do encourage you to think small as well as large. And if you could put some details down, I'm going to ask you if you'd be very kind enough to write it down on the yellow cards for me, because I'm going to use it as a sneaky opportunity to harvest a lot of these wonderful ideas. And also, please, could you add your church and location? That would be really helpful. So anything at all that you're doing in and around your church building to connect with the community. Fabulous, thank you so much. would you feel able to share some of the things that you've written down that you are already doing to connect with the community?
We have a community cafe once a month where it's just a drop-in
Yeah,
cafe.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did anyone hear that? Community cafe once a month. Yeah.
Fellowship group, which is for church members but also the community.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a good mix of the community coming,
Uh-huh.
which is really good.
That's lovely. Very good. Yeah.
We started a thing called Tea and Toast,
Yeah.
which is, and we do probably about half a dozen a year, and they are interviews, they are tea and toast obviously, and interviews with different people in the village about what they did before they arrived at the village or what they've done, so like local farmers and anybody, and it's been a really nice thing for people seeing members of the community in a different way, because all sorts of things, they've done all sorts of things that nobody knew about.
That's so interesting.
There's some extraordinary things. One person, we found that he designed the plastic £20 note.
Oh, really? That we all use. So just for the benefit, that they're recording this session, just for the benefit of the recording, I'll say that was Tea and Toast run. And how often do you have those sessions?
We tend to, they're in the sort of winter and the spring, so we probably do about 6. We do a series of 6.
Okay, series of
and
6.
then not in the summer.
Okay.
And
that's about different villages and just interviewing them about their lives. Great, that's a really, really fascinating event to be holding. Any other events, any other things you're doing? Yes.
I'm an LLM, so I've had to write about the team, right? But one of the churches did a refurbishment. They were very well aware that the village had no village hall and the village pub had closed. So when they refurbished, they opted for chairs, and they every year put on a couple of art exhibitions, selling exhibitions for the local art group. They put on concerts and they put on lectures, but they also have a room where the parish, as opposed to the parish church council, meet, because there's nowhere else for them to go in the village.
Brilliant. So that church is actually sort of slightly stepping into the space of the village hall, as well as sort of kind of diversifying its presence in the community. And art exhibitions, actually a space for the parish council, the secular parish council, to be meeting. Fascinating, fascinating. Any other stories?
Monthly coffee mornings.
Monthly coffee mornings.
Where it's not just church people, it's we maybe get 50 or 60 people.
Brilliant.
Some people have tabletops, sales at the same time.
Oh, brilliant. What sort of tabletop sales? What sort of things?
I do a bookstall.
Bookstall.
We have bric-a-brac, cake stall, which is always sold out.
Lovely.
So some people
So it's a
just pop in
community
to buy a
social
cake.
event
Yeah.
with all these kind of other little side hustles going on. Fantastic. Anything else, Jan? Yeah.
We've got a project called Welcome Spaces.
Welcome Spaces, yeah.
It's open to everyone in the community and it's free to attend.
Uh-huh.
Every Wednesday, like some of these others, tea, coffee, games, quiz, lunch, all sorts throughout the whole day. And we get the lonely and the isolated coming in. We often form a group of 4 and play Scrabble. And there's things like that. We're open to anybody who wants to
Welcome
come in.
space.
That's on a Wednesday. Similarly, Friday morning, bacon roll, tea and coffee. And the biggest one that people come to is the first Saturday of the month is a clothes swap.
Is a clothes swap.
Recycling
That's
clothes.
great. So who runs whose idea? How did the clothes swap come around? Who runs it?
It was, I don't think it came out of the PCC. It must have been people with young kids and wanting to
Yeah.
recycle their clothes.
Yeah.
It went on to become for adults as well. Anybody can come along.
And it's really, really popular as a concept, particularly for younger people. So if you're kind of pinching ideas, note that down, and it's something to start have a conversation with younger people about the idea of a clothes swap. Fantastic. Yeah. Anything else people feel able to share?
Can I say something a bit more about our church?
Yes.
Because we do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But it started, the crucial thing was we installed a toilet.
Right.
And that, it sounds pathetic, ridiculous, but that made us think completely differently
Toilets.
about
Yeah.
the church
Yeah.
and how we use
it can be a catalyst for that question about how this building can be used, isn't it? A toilet being a catalyst for that question about how you might use the church more widely and differently. Yeah. Yes.
We pray for people in the town on a regular basis, and then go out and stand on the street corner.
So prayer walking in the community. Yeah.
Our home group, or the group itself, has become quite sort of strong, really.
Lovely. That's a really, yeah. That's really fantastic. And do the community know that happens?
We're trying hard to sort of spread the word and reach out.
Yeah.
And just talk to people on like a sort of walkthrough, really.
Yeah. Because that raises an
benefits later, perhaps, not immediately.
No. But that raises an interesting point for us when we're thinking about developing the relationship with our community, and that is around how we tell our story. Because actually, sometimes we're doing these amazing things, big or small, going back to the idea of even having the church open, but how aware are people of these things in the community, and how do we tell our story? So that's something for us to be thinking about as well. So before we move on, anything else? Any other things to share? Yes.
I mean, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we had a church open day.
Yep.
Which we're hoping will become an annual event. But so we offered like a little guided tour of the church. We did the tower. We had a teddy bear. We did parachuting one year. We did zip line another year. And obviously tea and cakes. But we had lots of old photographs of the village. We had those on our
Lovely.
screen, just on a going through the cycle, which actually that was one of the really popular things. People just sat and watched.
Old photographs of the village and community memories.
Yes, we had lots of vestments on display. What else did we have? We had some outdoor activities for kids as well.
Yeah. This is I'm saying this is the benefit of the microphone, just repeating some things you've said. It's like a church open day of all the community.
Yes, and what was really interesting was actually, obviously lots of people came with children, but the majority of people helping with it were not people who come to church.
That's fabulous. Now, how did that come about? How did you develop that? Those people, being involved and helping.
So when we were sort of at the beginning of thinking about it, we approached one or two people who we thought might be willing to help. So,
yeah.
For instance, there's a couple of guys in the village who love going on the tower. So we thought they might want to help with the teddy bear thing, which they were
I'm sure they loved.
Yeah. And so the second year of doing it, some of their friends came and helped.
Brilliant.
And we asked the local guide leader if the guides would come and run an activity for us. We asked somebody who's sort of on the fringes if they would organise the teas and coffees and things. So it was.
So it becomes a community event, not just a church event, and you've just described there of finding people who you knew had an interest in the tower and connecting with them about, or like brownies, doing with refreshments. So you're actually kind of thinking, where might their interests and skills be that we could connect with them? Yeah. Fabulous. And it shifts, doesn't it, from being our church event that you can come to being, this is a community event for the church. Really interesting.
And we've also we've done when we started down the eco church route. We did a talk. We've done a couple of talks about things that came out of our churchyard survey. So we had a bat survey, and so then we had the person who'd done that come and do a talk about bats.
Fantastic.
It was really popular.
Yeah.
And then we did a bat walk one evening, which again was and what we were aiming at was just getting people to come into the building.
Yes, and the churchyard being a really significant place of engagement. Had one church, they were looking what they could do with their immaculate churchyard, but how could they actually use engagement? Well, they had a cycle trailway going nearby, so they then explored, well, actually, this is a lovely space. People could sit and have sandwiches or cups of tea. Why don't we look at putting in one of those log bike racks where people could come and put their bikes and develop it as a space where people could come off the trailway, and again using what they have and where they are to develop that engagement. You were going to say something at the back.
A lot of
fundraising things.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
In terms of getting the community to church is a bit of a problem because we're well out of the village community. We're a bit off the beaten track.
Geographically, the church is set up. Okay, yes, which does present its own challenges.
Yes, but we have fundraising cream teas every summer, a couple, and we introduce a Teddy Zipwire and
Yeah.
have plant sales and things like that.
Yeah.
But just trying to be creative about the different ways of involving the community in that. If we have something we put on at Christmas, for instance, last Christmas we organised the 12 Joys event. What's his name? Who wrote the little booklet, The 12 Joys of Christmas?
Yeah.
We thought, let's have an exhibition of the 12 Joys of Christmas and invite different community groups like the WI groups and gardening groups and things like that to put on their own little take for one of those.
The 12 Joys,
displays
lovely. Make it a collaborative event.
as a reason for opening the church.
Yeah. 2
Because
points.
it's not open every day.
No, so 2 points from, well, 3 points then from your last point, well, 3 points that come to mind about that is firstly, just to, you sound like you already know this, but just to state it, I have had conversations with some churches where they say, oh, yeah, the community, they're not interested. And when we carry on talking, and I say, well, why do you think that? They'll say, well, actually, they don't come on a Sunday morning. And that's their kind of, their benchmark. And actually that can't be our benchmark because we have a big cultural gap that we've got to connect across. And Sunday mornings are at the extreme end. So it's how do we connect across? And you are giving wonderful examples of how you are doing that. The second thing is about location of churches. Some churches are blessed and they're right in the centre of the community, visible, but others aren't. And then it's a question of, well, how do you take your presence out into the community, which can work anyway. So we had one church that was a dual carriageway had been put in, which effectively cut it off from the burgeoning new community of new housing. So people often didn't even know it was there. So one thing that we did was we were working on this project and we put up, so we had some roll-up banners and it had a beautiful image of the church. It had the project title we were working was called Love St Mary's. And actually they went out and they were there at village events, including the school parents' open evening, just trying to kind of raise the awareness. And the third thing is around getting your church open every day, which is a real challenge, as you said, but again, can be something that you can look at as more of a community initiative, a community project. So I keep hearing different. We had one church. This church that was isolated have actually gone down the route of having a door lock, a timed door lock, electronic door lock, so that it opens and closes. It does require gentle oversight, but nevertheless that is their solution. Another solution, they worked with dog walkers, community dog walkers, to get a rota of people opening and closing the church. And another one, they built the relationship with the school, and it was the head teacher who ended up opening the school every day because he was literally next door. So these always encourage churches to think community first. When there's something you want to do or something that you are thinking about, how can we invite the community into that space? Like you were saying, who out there might be interested in? And a classic example, I guess, would be the history of the church and the heritage of the church. If you want to do a new guidebook or a children's trail, you don't have to do that yourself. So many churches worry about capacity, but often the capacity can be found in the community by connecting with people around a shared area of interest, whether that's history or whether that's through doing things for children. So that's something to think about. Anything else before we move on about sharing practice? Yes.
The team I work with have 6 churches,
Yep.
2 of which have a primary school next door.
Yes.
And so we make a point that every month or at least 3 times a term,
Yeah.
school comes into church.
Yeah.
So that the children are perfectly used to running in and out of the church. It's a perfectly normal place to be. And you never know, one day they might bring mum as well.
Yeah, and I think it's if you're lucky enough to have it needn't even be a church school, but schools nearby, they are wonderful opportunities to invite into the space. Yes.
I was just going to say a few things. So we have the children come from our village church down to once a term, and
Yeah.
they lead the service, and we invite all the community as well to come along. And then we have a year 6 leavers morning.
Fabulous.
They come and we talk to them about a bit about the church, and moving on, we present them with a scallop shell.
Lovely.
As a part of our journey, relating it to the Camino pilgrimage. And they have an opportunity to ring the bells as well. So we do that. And then, similar to these guys here, we do just odd kind of events. We do themed flower festivals.
Fabulous.
We've also done a nativity exhibition, so we've got nativity exhibits of
Yeah.
from different countries or different perspectives.
Nice.
And I think we have to be careful that we don't just try and ask people for money. We do put on musical evenings and things like that.
Yeah.
But these sort of things, we just invite people, we do decent
Yeah.
copies and there's donations.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're looked at as being money.
No, you're trying to build a relationship. Yes.
We also get quite a lot of visitors from overseas, and that is something that we develop because of the association between our church and Canada.
Brilliant. So yes, your particular
There's a
context.
link there that we've actually managed to develop, and people have come back. To
Fantastic.
visit us as well.
Yeah. So you're talking about overseas tourism, but also local tourism is a big one for all of us, isn't it? Yes, a couple more, and then we're going to move us on.
We're probably going to say the same
Oh,
thing.
okay.
I just wanted to say something about church clipping.
Yes, I was right. I was
Yeah.
going to say the
Church
same
clipping.
thing.
Yes.
Tell us more. No, tell us more about church clipping. Have people heard of church
It's,
clipping? No.
It's an old tradition.
Yeah.
And the idea, it's basically it's the community embracing the church. So physically, what happens is you join hands. People join hands around the outside of the church. That's all they do.
Fabulous. And does it happen at a certain time of the
Yeah,
year?
we do it. Well, we've got it. We're doing it on the 28th of June this year.
28th of June.
Followed by cream teas.
Fabulous. So again, church clipping,
So-
literally coming
so
together and
yes,
encircling. I love
We
that.
say to people, we need 100 people to do it.
Yeah.
We cheat sometimes if we haven't got quite 100.
We have bits of ribbon.
That's good. Oh, that-
But it is
We hardly ever need them.
it's
but
a
we have
metaphor
to
of
just-
the
It's fabulous.
of the community
Yeah.
embracing the church.
That's a lovely. I love that story. That's what I hope that's on your yellow card. Right. Well, from everything that you have been sharing, a few points come to mind. The first one is there is so much wonderful practice and community engagement happening across the diocese. Look at all the stories you've started to tell here. We are our own best resource for ideas and inspiration. And the challenge and the question for all of us is twofold. Firstly, how can you connect with other churches in your locality to swap ideas, inspiration, and share skills and experience and maybe resources? But equally, it goes the other way. And the question could be, you have these amazing ideas and practice. How can you share those with other churches? Obviously, this can work within a benefice, but it can go beyond. And if we can start to do that and share our ideas, we're resourcing each other. And again, we know that at the diocese, we've got a really important role to play in that. And part of my job, I've been moving into a slightly new role. Part of my job will be to try and, as I'm doing today, gather your stories and see if we can share them for inspiration and ideas. So you're not alone. We've actually got each other for moral support, and we've got to work with each other more. The second point is, you've described a whole range of things, and this morning, the earlier session, again, a whole range of things came up there. you don't have to do everything. You can do with what's appropriate for your context, and it's going to be very different. We've already mentioned one church struggling with geography, being out of the village, and churches maybe more in bigger residential areas or much more deep rural. So it's what works for you in your context, and also where your interests and energies might lie as a church family. So a starting point for developing community engagement can just start with you as people. You know, what are your interests and passions in life in general? It needn't just be about the building, but it could be in life. So somebody was talking about gardening. They loved being a gardener, and they obviously, everyone seems to have masses of courgettes at the end of the harvest season, don't they? And they set up a glut market or a sharing market stall in the church. It's cool, it preserves the fruit and vegetables well, and they actually use that interest that they had and the church with the community to use the building in that way. So it's starting with your context, you as people, in order to build your engagement. So let's think about that then. The next stage on is, okay, so there's some fabulous practice going on here. How can we develop it? How can we deepen it? Now, what I'm going to describe and talk to you about may not be new. I might actually be describing what you are already doing, but that actually can be very helpful in and of itself, because it helps you understand how you are working, and then hopefully will encourage you to think of even more ways to continue that. When we ask ourselves, how do we deepen community engagement? The question often forms, how can we get more people interested in the church? That is often how the question gets shaped. And I do hear that, people saying, we want to get people interested in the church. And it goes back to what we just mentioned earlier. We face a cultural gap around that. And it's not to say that people aren't interested, but actually we've got to deal with that cultural gap. And one of the ways we can do that is by changing the question. So rather than saying, how can we get people interested in the church, it would be to frame it along these lines. How could we connect with local people to discover how this church building can be of more use and value and meaning to the community? It sounds like a small shift in wording, but it's actually quite a different type of question, because you're then starting to look at this building as a resource, as a special place in the community, and starting to ask a very open question. How can this space, this resource, be a blessing, I suppose, to the community? How might it help the people, organisations, and this community to flourish? And you won't know the answer to that, because obviously the answer depends on the people in the community. So it's a very different type of question, and it represents a shift in mindset. And the shift in mindset is this: from our long established way of looking at our community, thinking that we want to do things to the community or for the community, that we're serving the community. That's our tradition. It's a really honourable, loving tradition, but we think, how can we serve? How can we do things for the community? But often that still keeps a separation between community and church. Rather, we shift into a space where we start to think, how can we do things with the community, and how might we make space so the community, so things might be done in the church and for the church by the community, captured in that lovely picture you had of the community being there with the church family holding the church. So moving from the idea of doing things for the community to with the community, that shift in the way we look at things and the way we work has actually been analysed internationally, looking at how communities develop and change. And it's been a process over the last sort of 70, 80 years. They've been analysing community development programmes, and they said that the most effective, long-lasting change happens when you've got people coming together. People coming together, building relationships. They're building relationships around common ground, around common interest. And so this is the opportunity this gives us to come across the cultural divide. But we need to find those areas of common interest. Before we think about that, I'll just say a little bit about how this relates to our Christian mission. Because, for example, if we're finding common ground around history or gardening or whatever it may be, how does that relate to our Christian mission? Well, there's perhaps two aspects to that. And the first is that when we're building relationships and we're offering this church as an asset, a resource that the community may be able to use in some way, that's an act of love. It's part of loving our neighbours as ourselves, the two greatest commandments. And I think for our visions for our church buildings, how wonderful that is, that we're loving God and loving our neighbour as ourselves. But the second is this, that as we build relationships, as we draw close to people in the community through this church building, someone said it in the previous group, they start to see us as normal people, as rather than the church or the religious club. It softens those barriers, and people meet the embodied faith, hope and love of the gospel, which is in your lives, which you are living out, as well as in and told by our church buildings. And it really does happen. So we've got a couple of churches I'm working with, and we've been doing this, and then you'll hear the stories of people starting to say, well, yes, people are starting to ask me about what happens at the church and what happens with baptism, and a few people they're starting to come on Sundays because the boundaries are softening and relationships are building. And the Reverend Sam Wells, who's a priest and theologian, he's written extensively on this, and he calls it incarnational mission. It's where we are being with. We're being with. We're not asking, we're not searching out for a need. How can we help? How can we do things for? We are being with, and we're in a mutual relationship, and we see what emerges. And it can be very creative, very exciting, but it's a different way of operating. So the next question is, well, how do we actually do that? How do we do that? And again, I am conscious that as I kind of talk about this, a lot of this I hope you kind of be recognising in your own situations, in your own practice. But one way to do it is to think about how you might have community conversations. This morning, before the day started, I was chatting to a lady, and she was a church warden, and I know her church. I just happen to know all the churches in the diocese, but I do know her church, and it's a little bit off the beaten track, but she was in the churchyard, and a gentleman crossed the churchyard, and they got into conversation, and he said to her, oh, I noticed your flag, it's looking quite dishevelled, a bit tatty. And she sort of said, oh, yes, no, it's on my to-do list. I'm really conscious of that. And he said, well, actually, I do flags. I don't know what that means, but he said, I do flags. It was a military area, so maybe not totally surprising. And he said, I'd love to work with you and help restore it. And then after that, he came back with another suggestion saying, how would you feel if I helped organise a poppy display and we linked it with a trail around the rest of the area? And in that little space, the churchyard, it represents what we call bumping spaces. It's the places in our communities where it may be in the shop, it may be in the park, dog walking, where you have conversations. So community conversations can be as simple as the conversations you have literally out and about in your community. But they can be more intentional. You can actually arrange to have meetings with people. So I will tell you a story, and it does involve a toilet. So one church wanted to develop their engagement and develop their church life. So they felt, Well, obviously the key to this would be to get a toilet because they didn't have one. I will say, as a little postscript to what we were saying earlier about toilets, is that I don't think toilets are your starting point or the whole answer, although they do play an important part. And the reason I say that is this. So they started off the journey to getting a toilet, and they installed a temporary toilet. And they're like, that's great, we have a temporary toilet, and now we can unlock doing things for the community. So the first thing that they had in the diary was a concert with our own former Bishop Andrew coming and doing a concert, and then it went very well. The church was full, and it went very well. And I met them afterwards, and I said, "This is great. How did it go?" And they said, "Yeah, it was good. It was really good. It was really well attended." And there was a pause, and they said, "But when we thought about it, actually the people there were from the benefice. They were not from the local community." And the gentleman said to me, "Can you see how hard it is to get to people to cross the threshold?" And we thought about that, and we talked about it, and we looked at the idea of the cultural gap, and whether, however good Bishop Andrew was, whether the bishop doing a concert was going to be culturally the thing that they could connect with, or what they would be interested in. And so we then decided we would start asking the different question, and through community conversations. So we actually started with the school, because we started with a connection that they already had. So we met with the head teacher, and the conversation was different. So another church had said to me, "Oh yes, we went to see the head teacher to talk about, developing what we can, the relationship." And so we said, we gave them an idea of what we could do. We could do assemblies, we could do open the book, we could do visits to the church, all of which fantastic. However, as soon as the conversation was framed in those terms, those church terms, it kept the conversation in that box. So we took a different approach, and we met with the head teacher, and we said, this is a conversation. We want to see how this church could be used more as a resource for the community. And what's going well for you in school? What are some of the pressure points and difficulties you're facing in school? And might this building be a resource for you? And it was a good conversation. The head teacher went away, and he came back in the following week and said, "I've been thinking about what you've said. And the pressure for us is on providing wraparound care for children before and after school provision. And to do that, we're going to have to let go of a children's exercise group that we host. And I wonder whether you may help us and actually host this children's exercise group, Taekwondo." And so this was I think the church were like, "Oh gosh, okay." They had to process it. Was it something they felt they could do? Could they host it? They did happen to have movable pews, so it's context specific, but they did. And that is established now. The knock-on effect of that is, when they came to do their community harvest celebration, the Taekwondo family and children were at that because they were using that space. It was part of their world now. And when people began to hear about what was going on, other people came and said, "Oh, a community support officer said, I hear what's going on. Could I come and run a surgery, a kind of surgery in the church?" So from one community conversation, there's a little ripple effect starts to happen. So the community conversations are really general. They're about what people value locally in their community, what's great in the community, what's missing or what could enhance it, maybe around what their interests and passions are, the church could be a vehicle for or in some way support. A bit like something you mentioned, your clothes swap. In another church, they'd lost the WI market, and people were feeling that as a loss. So they were interested in the idea of working with the community to do some kind of market. And through conversations, they found out that younger people have what's called side hustles. And that means that they have their job, but they often are running some kind of side hustles. I mean, they might be making jewellery or upcycling clothes. So they actually put their market on, but opened it up to younger people to have their stalls running a side hustle. And that came out through a community conversation, and just changed how they were doing, how they were approaching an idea that had emerged. So somebody asked me earlier in the earlier session, is this about hiring out your space, or is it about opening up and using your space for the community? It's actually more for the latter, because, and he was saying, when you hire your space out, again, it's sort of client and service provider. You're back in that we're doing things 2 and 4. So it's very much about making space for the communities to become stakeholders in the building through the common ground and what interests them. Practically, as I said, where we hope that will go is that as the community feel more invested in the space, that you start to share your story of all these wonderful things that you're doing, but also of just what it takes to care for these historic buildings. And the fact that we need more volunteers to perhaps care, the maintenance. We also need more financial support. But the storytelling becomes different then, because then you're not saying, please can you support the church? You're asking people to support our shared, asset within the community. And as a word of encouragement, I've found that when the community are invited to participate and be involved, they are holding the space in all its functions. So when all the things that you've written down here, the church can function as a social space, as a heritage space, as a sacred space, as a worship space. But generally the community aren't coming in and going, well, I only want to be involved as a heritage space. They are actually interested in it as a sacred space as well. They perhaps don't know how to connect with it as a sacred space, and that's a whole topic for another day, but they are interested. So again, this is just a snapshot from the churches I'm working with, but when it's become to financial support for the church, where this relationship is building and this kind of openness to new ideas and ways of using the building, the giving is, they're not picking it apart and saying, well, I'll pay money but only to support the fabric rather than the religious bit. Actually, it's like, well, this is the total amount it is to preserve this building as a heritage space, but also as a sacred space in our community. And you can ask, and people respond to that. But again, that's about changing this, the way that we're working. We can see people gathering behind. Let's see where we are. Oh, I think we're really running over time. Everything that we've talked about, I've put into the pack. So I'm conscious that we've it's almost like starting a conversation and then we have to finish it, but it's in the pack. I've also put my contact email, so please do drop me a line if you've got anything more to share. I'd be delighted to hear more stories, but also if you want to run anything past me or to ask for any other information. The last sheet in your pack is where do you start with community conversations, and the easiest place is where you've already got connections, and that sheet just gets you to think who you're connected with already, and you can just start there. Just start with the people you're already connected with. So I hope we can stay in touch. I hope we can carry on developing these conversations, because we've got so much good practice to share with each other and to encourage each other with. Thank you.
Thank you.